day that you could never forget. And you know, the public were going crazy. Never seen the fans in football go as crazy as they did this particular day, you know.
Gordon Banks died at 81 as a World Cup hero, but the biggest controversies around his name show why the clean version of his story was never the full truth. He was loved by millions and called one of the greatest goalkeepers who ever lived. But after he died, his name got pulled into something strange online. New videos and claims spread, hinting that the truth about his life and death had been hidden, as if there was a big secret waiting to be found. I am Oliver, and this is Sport Icons. Here is the truth. Gordon Banks did not die in secret. He did not die in mystery. He died peacefully in his sleep on the 12th of February 2019. He was 81 years old. He had fought kidney cancer for a long time. His family gave a clear and honest statement through Stoke City. There was no cover-up. There was no hidden cause. The real story is not that someone silenced him or destroyed him. The real story is that his whole life got flattened into a simple, perfect legend, and that legend hides a lot of the messy truth. And if you think this story deserves more than the soft version people were given, use the hype feature and give this video hype as we go deeper. Online, there is a pattern. Video titles like "Here's What They Lied About" get used again and again for footballers who have passed away, hinting at a hidden truth or a dark secret behind a famous death. It is a formula built to grab clicks, not to tell the truth. With Gordon Banks, it does not fit. His death was open, his illness was public. The only real mystery in his story happened years earlier, while he was still very much alive. Before Gordon Banks passed away for real, a fake story about his death had already spread once before. It happened in October 2017. At that time, Banks was 79 years old. He was already fighting kidney cancer, a disease he had lived with since 2005. While he was still receiving treatment, a false report appeared online. It claimed that Banks had died at his home in Sheffield. The story even carried a fake quote, said to be from his wife, Ursula. None of it was true. This hoax caused real pain. An anonymous caller rang the family home just to check if the story was true. Family already dealing with cancer had to answer a phone call asking if their loved one had died, when he had not. Banks's own great-grandson heard the false news from a classmate at school and cried the whole day. When Banks found out, he did not stay quiet. He called it a disgrace. He called it disgusting. He said that no website, no platform, and no publisher ever apologized. Despite everything, Banks kept living his life. Not long after the hoax, he traveled to Moscow to help with the official draw for the 2018 FIFA World Cup at the Kremlin Palace. This is the part people miss when they hear titles like, "Here's What They Lied About." The real lie was not about his death. The real lie came earlier, while he was alive and fighting illness. And nobody who spread that lie ever said sorry. To understand the man behind the legend, you need to go back to where he came from. Gordon Banks was born in Sheffield on the 30th of December 1937. This was not a soft start in life. He left school at just 15 years old in 1952 and went straight to work for a local coal merchant. Later, he worked as a hod carrier, carrying heavy bricks on building sites. That kind of work builds strength. It also builds toughness that does not show up in highlight reels. His path into football was almost by accident. He played for an amateur side called Millspore. One day, their usual goalkeeper did not turn up, so Banks stepped into goal instead. People noticed something special in him straight away. From there, he had a short spell with Rawmarsh Welfare in the Yorkshire League, went back to Millspore for a while, and was then signed into the youth system at Chesterfield. He was not born into football fame. He built his way into it through hard labour, luck, and grit. Once he turned professional, football did not treat him gently either, even as he became one of the best in the world. Banks made his senior debut for Chesterfield in the 1958 to 1959 season. In 1959, he moved to Leicester City. There, he became a top-level goalkeeper. He helped Leicester win the Football League Cup in 1964, and he played in 2 FA Cup finals with the club. But in 1967, Leicester made a hard business decision. They sold Banks to Stoke City to make room for a rising young goalkeeper named Peter Shilton. Even one of the best goalkeepers on the planet was moved on when the club decided it was time. At Stoke City, Banks reached legend status. He helped the club win the 1972 League Cup, beating Chelsea in the final. On the way to that trophy, Stoke had a dramatic semi-final against West Ham United that needed 2 replays to settle. In one of those matches, West Ham's own captain, Bobby Moore, had to go in goal as an emergency keeper, and he even saved a penalty. Banks was named Football Writers Association Footballer of the Year in 1972. He had reached the very top of the English game, even after being pushed out of Leicester. At the same time, he was building one of the greatest international careers English football has ever seen. Banks played for England between 1963 and 1972, earning 73 caps. At the 1966 World Cup, played on home soil, he played every single minute of England's winning campaign. He kept clean sheets against Uruguay, Mexico and France in the group stage, then helped beat Argentina in the quarter-final. He did not concede a single goal until the 442nd minute of the tournament, when Portugal's Eusebio scored a late penalty in the semi-final. That run without conceding still stands as an England record. Lifted the World Cup with his country. It was the peak of English football history, and Banks was right at the centre of it. But there is a problem with letting 1966 define the whole story. It makes everything look simple and perfect. It skips over the pain, the suspicion, and the controversy that came just 4 years later in Mexico at the 1970 World Cup. That tournament gave the world what is often called the greatest save in football history. In the group stage, England faced Brazil. In the heat of Guadalajara, Brazil's Jairzinho crossed the ball to the far post, where Pelé met it with a powerful downward header. Pelé was so sure it was a goal that he shouted, "Goal!" before the ball even reached the net. But Banks threw himself across his goal, judged the bounce off the hard ground, and used his right thumb to flick the ball up and over the crossbar. Pelé later said that Banks appeared like a kind of blue phantom, coming from nowhere to stop the impossible. It is still shown today as one of the finest pieces of goalkeeping ever filmed. Here is the uncomfortable side of that moment. That one save became so huge, so replayed, and so famous that it began to swallow the rest of his career. Banks himself said that people would remember him for that single save more than for helping England win the World Cup. A World Cup winner, and his legacy still got reduced to a few seconds of footage. Greatness became a trap. The public wanted one moment, not the whole man. The most debated part of Gordon Banks's story happened just days after that famous save, before England's 1970 quarter-final against West Germany. This is where the clean legend really starts to crack, because what happened next has never been fully explained. The tournament itself was already tense. England struggled badly with the heat and the high altitude in Mexico. Before the tournament even started, Captain Bobby Moore had been arrested in Colombia, wrongly accused of stealing an emerald bracelet from a jewelry shop in Bogotá. The charges were dropped, but the damage to team spirit was already done. On top of that, manager Sir Alf Ramsey had publicly criticised Mexico as a host nation, which did not win England many friends. The English Football Association tried to protect the players, brought their own food, their own drinking water, and even their own team bus. Local beer, though, was seen as safe because people believed the brewing process killed off any germs. During a rest period at the Guadalajara Country Club, Banks drank a bottle of that local beer. Years later, he admitted he could not remember whether the bottle had been opened in front of him or not. Within 30 minutes of drinking it, he became seriously ill. He had heavy sweating, shivering, vomiting, and painful stomach spasms. What happened next does not fully add up. Banks remembered a terrible night on the bathroom floor of his hotel, followed by a rough 5-hour bus journey to Leon, where he said he felt as weak as a kitten. But the notes written by team doctor Neil Phillips told a very different story. He wrote that Banks slept through the afternoon, had no further sickness, and was symptom-free. 2 accounts of the same illness, and they do not match. While Dr. Phillips was away delivering the team kit to the stadium, Alf Ramsey and his assistant, Harold Shepherdson, gave Banks a basic fitness test out on a lawn. Shepherdson rolled the ball to him gently, almost like a father playing with a toddler. Banks told them he was fit to play, but later, during a team meeting crammed into Ramsey's hot hotel room, symptoms came back hard. Banks began sweating heavily again, and then he fainted. Dr. Phillips had no choice but to rule him out of the match. Peter Bonetti took his place in goal. England led West Germany 2-0, and still lost the match 3-2. teammate Peter Osgood found the whole situation suspicious. Every player on that squad had eaten and drunk the same food and the same drinks, yet only Banks became seriously ill. That detail sparked talk of foul play. American Senator Stuart Symington, related to Daily Telegraph journalist Bob Oxby, suggested something far bigger. He raised the idea that the CIA may have poisoned Banks to clear England out of Brazil's way to the final. At the time, the United States was backing Brazil's military dictatorship, a government that had taken power in 1964. Washington viewed that regime as an important anti-communist ally in Latin America, and a World Cup win for Brazil could have boosted national pride for the government and pulled attention away from its harsh rule. For decades, this theory stayed as talk and rumor. Then, in 2026, a podcast series called Foul Play, hosted by Banks's own grandson, Jervis, along with journalist Gabriel Gatehouse, dug into the case properly. During their investigation, they uncovered files from the Mexican secret police. These files included Gordon Banks's name and his photograph. That discovery proved something important. Banks had been watched by state security while he was in Mexico for the World Cup. But watched is not the same as poisoned. Surveillance is not proof of a crime. Host nations often keep an eye on famous foreign visitors during major events for basic security reasons. To this day, there is no direct evidence and no declassified documents that prove the CIA poisoned Gordon Banks. The mainstream explanation still stands. Most experts believe he suffered a severe case of bacterial food poisoning, something that was sadly common for travelers in Mexico at that time. The truth here is messy and unfinished. The illness clearly changed the outcome of that World Cup, and the official explanation always had gaps in it. But turning suspicion into a certain fact would be its own kind of lie. Just 2 years after that World Cup illness, Gordon Banks's career took another brutal turn, this time away from the pitch entirely. On Sunday, the 22nd of October 1972, Banks was involved in a serious car crash near Madeley Heath. He was on his way back from physical therapy at the Victoria Ground, treating a shoulder injury from a recent match against Liverpool. He was driving a Ford Consul and tried to overtake a slow-moving lorry on the road. As he pulled out, he collided head-on with an oncoming Austin A60 van. The impact sent his car spinning off the road and into a ditch. The injuries were severe. Flying glass from the windscreen tore into his face and his right eye, damaging the retina badly. Surgeons used 100 tiny micro-stitches on his eye alone, along with 200 more stitches across his face, but they could not save the sight in that eye. It is easy to paint this only as cruel bad luck. That is not how Banks himself saw it. He accepted the blame for the crash, and later said plainly that he was not bitter because he knew he was the one to blame. The crash ended his top-flight career in England, but it did not end things the very next day, as some tellings suggest. He had played 11 senior games for Stoke that season before the crash, and his 73rd and final England cap had already come against Scotland. In May 1973, Banks travelled with Stoke on a tour of New Zealand. He played the first half of a match against Auckland, which Stoke lost 3-1. His positioning let him down, and he was caught out of his goal for Auckland's opening goal. He was substituted at half-time and did not play the remaining matches on that tour. After that, he stepped back from playing in England and became Stoke's youth goalkeeping coach. Over the next 4 years, his left eye slowly began to compensate for the vision he had lost. In 1977, Banks made a genuine comeback, signing for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers in the North American Soccer League. Playing with sight in only one eye, he appeared in 37 games, helped the Strikers win their division, and the team had the best defensive record in the league that season. Banks was named Nassau Goalkeeper of the Year in 1977. He also played a single game on loan for St Patrick's Athletic in Ireland that year, and earlier, in 1971, on loan at Hellenic FC in South Africa. This comeback deserves real respect, but it was not a full recovery. Banks adapted brilliantly to playing with one working eye. That does not mean he ever got his old vision back. After he stopped playing, Banks moved into management, taking charge of non-league side Telford United. That spell ended in December 1980, when he was sacked. He later described it as a heartbreaking disappointment. Away from the game, Banks lived a fairly modest life. At one point, to help his own children buy their own homes, he made the decision to sell his 1966 World Cup winners' medal at auction. It sold for £124,750. Picture that for a moment. One of England's greatest sporting heroes selling his own World Cup medal to help his family get on with ordinary life. Through much of this, Banks was also privately dealing with kidney cancer, first diagnosed in 2005. He chose to keep a lot of that illness private, away from headlines and cameras. In February 2019, after that long battle, died peacefully in his sleep. He was 81 years old. He was survived by his wife Ursula and their children, Robert, Wendy, and Julia. So where does that leave the story of Gordon Banks? When he died, tributes poured in from across the football world, including from Pelé himself, from Peter Shilton, and from Gary Lineker. Football historians at the International Federation of Football History and Statistics rank him as the second greatest goalkeeper of all time, behind only the great Lev Yashin. His name is tied forever to England's 1966 World Cup win, to that impossible save against Pelé in 1970, and to a one-eyed comeback that most people would never have attempted. The clean, simple legend of Gordon Banks was never the whole truth. It skipped over a hoax that tortured his family while he was still alive to feel it. It skipped over a food poisoning scandal that still carries real, unanswered questions. It skipped over a car crash that he blamed on himself, a comeback that came at a real physical cost. But none of that makes Gordon Banks a smaller figure. If anything, it makes him a far more human one. He was not a myth. He was not a perfect, untouchable legend built purely for headlines. He was a working-class boy from Sheffield, who carried bricks, found his way into goal by accident, became a World Cup winner, survived illness, survived injury, and kept getting back up. That is a far better story than any clickbait title could ever tell you.